Hello and welcome to our four-module webinar series, Improving Instruction with Alabama's new Teacher Observation Tool. My name is Osiris Jolayemi, and I currently serve as Vice President for Professional Learning at Cognia. I'm excited to walk through this webinar with Dr. Angie Pelton of the Alabama State Department of Education. This webinar will serve as a high-level overview of Alabama's new teacher observation tool. To begin our series today, let's watch a short video from Dr. Mackey. Dr. Mackey?
We're excited to announce that we will be utilizing a new teacher observation instrument in January 2022 called the Alabama Teacher Observation Program, or ATOP. We've partnered with Cognia to provide an instrument that provides qualitative data that captures effective teaching. A task force of teachers, administrators, superintendents, and other education stakeholders worked together and served as an advisory group to guide us through this work along with Cognia. ATOP meets our ESSA requirements. It aligns with our goals identified in Alabama Achieves, that's about highly effective educators, and it correlates with the Alabama core teaching standards. The tool has been field tested and piloted throughout the state. The executive leadership team also utilized this observation tool in both virtual classrooms and physical classrooms to ensure that the criteria were met. The results indicate that this instrument is valid and meets the appropriate standards for inter-rater reliability. So this instrument determines areas of needs and strengths and also areas of growth, and it allows teachers and principals opportunities to have conversations about effective teaching practices. Also, the tool assists educators in developing professional development plans and choosing informed professional learning experiences. The administrator training is coming soon, and it will occur throughout the state at all 11 of our regional in-service centers starting in September of 2021. Specific training locations and dates are available on August 2nd, 2021, and you can find those on our new website, alabamaachieves.org, as soon as they're posted. Administrators will be able to register for training in PowerSchool on this date. Again, that's August the 2nd. And then for further information, we'd ask that you please contact Dr. Angie Pelton. That's at apelton@alsde.edu.
Thank you, Dr. Mackey, for setting the stage for our learning about the teacher observation tool. In this webinar, Cognia and the Alabama State Department of Education have partnered to give you an overview of the teacher observation tool in 4 modules. The provided information will give you insight into the why and the how behind the tool, the dimensions outlined in the tool, the connection to the Alabama core teaching standards, and finally, the rollout plan for the Alabama State Department of Education. Dr. Angie will begin with details on why the teacher observation tool is needed. Angie?
Hello, I'm Dr. Angie Pelton with the Alabama State Department of Education. So why does Alabama need a new teacher observation tool? Well, ESSA requires states and districts to report disparities that result in low-income students and minority students being taught by ineffective, inexperienced, or out-of-field teachers at higher rates than other students. States must design measures and definitions of effectiveness and ineffectiveness and define inexperienced in order to identify and address imbalances in teacher distribution. Alabama defines an effective teacher as one who can demonstrate strong instructional practices, produce significant growth in student learning, and demonstrates professionalism and dedication to the field of teaching. An inexperienced teacher has fewer than 2 years of teaching experience. An out-of-field teacher holds a valid Alabama teaching certificate and is assigned during the school day to teach in areas in which he or she is not properly certified. Or one who does not hold any valid Alabama certificate and is assigned during the school day to teach in an area or areas. Alabama recognizes that these disparities exist and that every student, every chance, every day deserves access to high quality instruction. Knowing the ESSA requirements and that teachers are the most influential factor determining a student's academic success, ALSCE formed a task force to review the current body of literature concerning teacher observation and the observation systems used in other states. As Dr. Mackey mentioned earlier, this task force was composed of superintendents, principals, teachers, counselors, and other educational stakeholders. We were fortunate to have a hardworking, dedicated task force committed to ensuring that this teacher observation tool was closely aligned with the Alabama Core Teaching Standards and designed to improve classroom instruction. The development of this tool would not have been possible without the combined years of experiences and expertise of each task force member. Alabama is truly blessed to have these individuals leading in local schools and districts. As you can see from the timeline, the project began in September of 2019. In 2020, we began researching the observation tools. However, the pandemic hindered our project rollout date that was originally set for August 2021. The revised timeline indicates that we will begin this project in January 2022. Trainings for administrators will begin in September through November of 2021. More information will be upcoming in the last video of this series. Now, let's watch a video from Mr. Scott Cofield, Superintendent and the Chair of the Task Force from Pelham City Schools.
I'm Scott Cofield. I'm the Superintendent of Pelham City Schools and was asked to chair the committee to create a new teacher evaluation system in the state of Alabama. Our task when we gathered was one, to meet a federal requirement that all teachers be evaluated each year. But more importantly than that, we wanted to bring together a group of educators, teachers, and administrators to really focus on improving teaching and learning. I think we've accomplished that. I think our focus the whole time was on teachers and administrators. We did not want to create something that required more work or added another layer of stuff on our teachers. But to create a system that was efficient and doable and accomplished the task of improving teaching and learning. I think we've accomplished that goal. I hope you see value in this instrument and in the training you're about to get, and we wish you all the best for the upcoming school year.
You have received impactful information regarding the teacher observation tool thus far. Thank you for joining us today. In the next modules, we will explore how the teacher observation tool was developed. We will learn all about the dimensions and the look-fors as an observer. And finally, learn the rollout plan for Alabama educators. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you in the next module. Welcome back to the second module in our webinar series, Improving Instruction with Alabama's new teacher observation tool. My name is Osiris Jolayemi with Professional Learning at Cognia, and Dr. Angie Pelton from the Alabama State Department of Education and I are excited to walk through this module 2 in our series. In the first module, we discussed the why behind the development of the teacher observation tool. In this module, we will look at the development process of the teacher observation tool, the collaborative project between Cognia and the Alabama State Department of Education. Let's take a look at the teacher observation tool at a high level. Cognia's teacher observation tool is designed to promote teachers' professional and continuous improvement journey toward the practice of learner-centric instruction and effective teaching and learning. This comprehensive tool provides rich formative data for teachers and administrators in order to engage in clear and focused feedback based upon direct classroom observations. The teacher observation tool has been designed to be applicable to all teaching contexts. The items have been carefully selected and vetted in the pilot test process for use in all subject areas and grade levels, and in all teaching modalities. It is intended for use in any classroom, regardless of geographic location or level of teacher experience. We conducted a pilot test, and this is the test for content and usability by the developers, and a field test for reliability and validity. Let's take a look at the development process. A thorough review of research on effective teaching practices was conducted to guide the development of the teacher observation tool. Each dimension and item has been aligned to this research, which you can view on the Item Alignment to Research table in the Observer Resources. Overall, research indicates that effective teachers possess qualities organized across 6 major categories. Those categories are content knowledge, which refers to the teacher's understanding of the curriculum and subject content. Pedagogical knowledge is the teacher's ability to provide relevant learning experiences that make subject matter accessibility to all learners. Delivery of instruction encompasses the strategies used by the teacher to plan for and implement instruction that effectively engages all learners. Assessment of and for learning, which refers to the ability to systematically gather, analyze, and use relevant data to measure learners' progress, guide instructional content and delivery, and provide timely feedback to learners. Learning environment considers the teacher's use of resources, routines, and procedures to provide a respectful, positive, safe, and learner-centric environment that is conducive to learning. And finally, professional disposition. This covers the teacher's ability to maintain commitment to professional ethics, use of effective communication, and participate in professional growth, resulting in enhanced student learning. Each item in the tool and the rubric was pilot tested and reviewed through multiple lenses. Regardless of the type of project the Innovation Lab at Cognia undertakes, we follow this development process. As you can see from this visual, the process is iterative and fluid, just like a development process should be. You will hear more about the outcomes of these phases from others, so I will focus on the first 3 to provide the backstory for the tool's development. During the first couple of meetings, the development team established non-negotiables to follow before we began to develop any content. You see a few of the non-negotiables here. The first one, reminding everyone associated with this project that this is a formative observation tool in which the items should be observed in a minimum of 20 minutes. Also, since we were living through COVID at the time, we were emphatic that the tool had to be as effective in a remote setting as it would be in a face-to-face setting. We accomplished all these non-negotiables and a few more. Next, we moved into the environmental scan phase of the development process. To do this, we divided up the world to find out what the most progressive or highest achieving institutions used to observe teachers and to understand the current reality in this space. Here you see a few items that capture key findings from our environmental scans. We learned that most institutions in the United States use Charlotte Danielson's or Robert Marzano's tools, or they add their customized content for the purpose of evaluating teachers. We also discovered that the process to observe teachers is not consistently implemented for non-core area teachers. Our next phase took us to the researching phase, driven by questions that emerge from literature focus on teacher effectiveness, quality, retention, efficacy, and pedagogy. We also read literature that aligned with student-centered learning, student agency, and equity. Once we had a solid understanding of the literature, we formed these 5 dimensions that provide the framework for the teacher observation tool. The team next had to determine the key attributes of each dimension and then write the items that further describe each attribute, all aligned to research and best practices. As an added piece of work, we ensured that the items in the teacher observation tool aligned with the items in Elliott, Cognia's student observation tool. What you see here is a draft version of the teacher observation tool as of October 2020. This was ready for the next phase of development. The project was now in the prototype phase, and it was time for us to conduct the pilot tests on the content and usability of the tool. Just as an information point, the Innovation Lab designs and conducts pilot tests on its projects. Pilot testing is a small-scale study designed to refine and improve the content and usability of the tool before the large-scale field testing, and it includes the 6 steps that are listed here on this slide. This particular pilot test had 3 goals. First, to see how the items on the observation tool would work in real-life application. Second, to make sure the rating guide supports the observation tool. And third, to make sure they are both easy to use. During the 2-week pilot testing window, 23 observations were made. The observations were reasonably spread across school type and were almost evenly spread between in-person and remote instruction. At the end of the pilot testing process, there were 3 groups of recommendations: making word changes to add clarity and invoke a common understanding of each item, reordering and/or moving items from one dimension to another to support the instructional cycle, and simplifying items by either combining, separating, and adding and or removing concepts. So now the development team had some work to do, and in following the Innovation Lab's fluid development process, which we talked about a little bit earlier, we were back in the creating phase. But no worries, this is how the process flows. Create, test, revise, and test again, and repeat again. So now let's talk a little bit about refining the content. The pilot test indicated that some items needed to be improved. Therefore, we went back to our creating phase in the Innovation Lab's development process. Here is a sample of the types of revisions that were made. The first dimension in the teacher observation tool is culture and climate. Culture and climate often describes feelings and emotions that are difficult to see. When we got into the pilot test, we realized our wording needed to be updated to make it clear to observers what they were looking for. Remember that Vicki said that the development team had lively discussions about words and that words matter. Well, here's one example. In item 1, the word cultivates was changed because cultivating is something that happens over a period of time, and it is not a specific observable action. So now we move into the prototype phase of our development process with the field tests. The field test was conducted to support development of the teacher observation tool. So how do we conduct research on this tool? Once the field study was designed and approved both internally and by our partners at the Alabama State Department of Education, more than 100 principals from across Alabama were recruited with the assistance of the Alabama State Department of Education. These participants were then trained by Cognia staff to ensure the accuracy and standardization of observations conducted using the teacher observation tool. The participants then conducted nearly 600 observations during January and February of this year. Data was captured about quality of remote, hybrid, and in-person classroom instruction. Cognia surveys was used to administer the tool during the field study since software development of the tool was not yet complete. Surveys is not optimized for this instrument, so active content and data management was necessary to ensure the success of the field study. The first priority for data resulting from this field study was to conduct an item analysis, supporting the work of the Innovation Lab in finalizing the teacher observation tool content. While development around all other aspects of the tool continues, further analysis of the field study results is being completed and documented in a research brief. In the end, what do we learn from research? Well, field studies enable us to answer key research questions. We are most interested in ensuring that the items in the teacher observation tool are of high quality. Item analysis results were reviewed together with the Innovation Lab, and we found that all of the items demonstrated desirable psychometric properties. In a testament to the high quality development efforts, none of the items in the tool demanded revision. Through coordinated efforts among various teams, execution of this field study ensured that evidence supporting the teacher observation tool was strong and convincing. Next, the team reviewed the results and saw that the pilot study had done what it was supposed to, which is to determine that the items were high quality, they were consistent, and reliable. The research team emphasized that no items needed changes. The Innovation Lab continued to carefully evaluate the data and conduct focus groups with both the Alabama State Department of Education principals and with Cognia staff. Through all of these studies, we ended up adjusting only one item from the content that we used in the field study. Once we got to the point that the content was complete, we were able to pass along the final content to IT to incorporate into the work that they had already started. Now let's turn to the core of the teacher observation tool, the 5 dimensions that are observed. Let's take a look at the teacher observation tool. It's organized into 5 dimensions: culture and climate, learning, essentials, agency, and relationship. Culture and climate describes the observable practices indicative of a positive classroom environment where learners are cared for, are safe, have a sense of belonging, and feel secure to share their thoughts. Learning outlines the observable practices utilized by the teacher to ensure learners have opportunities to demonstrate an understanding of the content and apply that knowledge and acquisition of skills. Essentials encompasses the observable practices that are related to the teacher's disposition and pedagogical knowledge, content knowledge, and management of the learning environment. Agency includes the observable practices that foster learners' ability to self-direct and self-regulate their learning. And finally, relationship covers the observable practices that foster healthy, positive connections between teachers and learners. And we will take a deeper look at all of those items within each dimension in our next session. The rating guide provides a rubric with 3 factors for each of the 4 levels of performance. The factors focus on teacher actions and behaviors and how those affect learners. The levels of performance descriptors are used to differentiate how evident each factor is on a given item in the tool. Thank you for joining us today. In the next module, we will take an in-depth look at each of the dimensions in the teacher observation tool. Have a wonderful day. Welcome to Module 3 in our webinar series, Improving Instruction with Alabama's new teacher observation tool. Cognia and the Alabama State Department of Education have partnered to bring you this webinar series. Let's review. Thus far, we have discussed the task force and development process for the teacher observation tool. And today, we're going to look at each of the observable dimensions. Let's turn to the core of the teacher observation tool, and that's the 5 dimensions that are observed. Let's look at the 5 dimensions: content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, delivery of instruction, assessment of and for learning, the learning environment, and professional disposition. The first dimension we will explore is culture and climate. Climate refers to the quality and the character of a school or institution that is reflective of its norms, goals, values, relationships, practices, and structures. The climate of an institution is typically subjective, whereas the culture of a school refers to the actual state or condition of the institution. Culture generally refers to the beliefs, perceptions, relationships, attitudes, and written and unwritten rules that shapes and influence every aspect of how an institution operates. In this dimension, we're looking for observable practices indicative of a positive classroom culture and climate. Specifically, we're looking for a learning environment that is created and sustained in which each learner is cared for, is safe, has a sense of belonging, and feels secure to share their thoughts. As you explore this dimension, there are 4 specific items that will be observed. The teacher fosters an environment that embraces all learners, treats each learner equitably, encourages learners to share their opinions without fear of negative comments from their peers, and the teacher creates enthusiasm for the learning at hand. Next, we will explore the learning dimension. This dimension is defined as processes established to ensure learners have opportunities to demonstrate an understanding of the content and apply that knowledge in the acquisition of skills. As you explore this dimension, there are 3 items to be observed. The teacher communicates clear explanations about the activities or tasks, for example, learning targets or outcomes. The teacher implements lessons and or activities that stimulate learners to use higher order thinking skills. For example, why or choices and application. The teacher also delivers lessons that are relatable to the learners and aligned to their interests. For example, choices, real life experiences, and connections to interests. The teacher monitors learners' understanding of the content and or the acquisition of skills. The teacher adapts instruction and or activities that meet individual learners' needs. And the teacher provides learners with purposeful feedback about their progress and or their needs. In our third dimension, that's the essentials dimension, it's defined as the core competencies demonstrated by an effective teacher, such as presence, disposition, pedagogical knowledge, content knowledge, and the management of the learning environment. In the essentials dimension, the teacher delivers and or facilitates the lesson with knowledge and confidence. The teacher communicates and upholds high expectations for the learner's behaviors to maximize learning and well-being. And the teacher facilitates the use of resources that support the learner's needs. Observers will look for evidence of the teacher delivering the lesson with confidence, holding high expectations for all learners, and using resources as needed to support the needs of the individual learners. The teacher also implements instructional strategies that actively engages learners and manages the learning time in an efficient and optimal manner. Observers also will look for implementation of strategies that actively engage learners and good management and instructional time. And the fourth dimension is agency. We define it as actions that fosters learners' ability to self-direct and self-regulate their learning. An effective teacher facilitates the development of a learner's growth mindset to become intrinsically motivated, and therefore, the learner's self-efficacy is improved. In this dimension, the teacher empowers learners to be responsible for the learning at hand and gives learners choices about learning activities or tasks, and also provides assistance for learners to navigate and monitor their learning progress. The teacher also encourages learners to persevere with or to seek challenging activities or tasks, and builds learners' growth mindset and self-efficacy. The fifth and final dimension is the relationship dimension. This dimension is defined as the actions that fosters healthy, positive connections between the teacher and the learners. These relationships are foundational to learners' social, emotional well-being and their ability to thrive in a globally diverse world. In this dimension, the teacher promotes respectful and caring interactions towards and between learners and cultivates learner cooperation, collaboration, and inclusivity, and preserves the learner's dignity while attending to their individual needs. Thank you for joining us today. In the final module, we will discuss the connections to the Alabama core teaching standards and how we can use the data and the rollout plan for Alabama educators. Have a wonderful day. Welcome to the fourth module in our webinar series, Improving Instruction with Alabama's new teacher observation tool. We continue a high-level overview of the tool. Let's get started with what we will cover today. Cognia and the Alabama State Department of Education have partnered to give you an overview of the teacher observation tool. Today's webinar will include why and how did we get the Alabama Teacher Observation Tool? What is the Teacher Observation Tool? How does it connect? What is the rollout plan? An FAQ for Cognia and the Alabama State Department of Education. And so now we will begin with a video.
Hi, I'm Stan Stokely, principal of Saraland Elementary School and Saraland City Schools just north of Mobile, Alabama. I had the privilege of serving on the Teacher Observation Tool Task Force for the last year and a half, along with a large number of educators, administrators, and teachers from all over the state of Alabama. We're excited about this tool. The first thing I want to do is draw your attention to the fact that it is not called a teacher evaluation tool. It's called a teacher observation tool. And the purpose of it is to collect data about instruction all over our state. Just to know how this all began, this is a requirement of the U.S. Department of Education. But just because it's a requirement didn't mean we wanted to do something that we could just get by with. We wanted to develop something that would actually be useful. And the information that's collected from this tool will be used to help develop professional development for teachers around the state, and then also can be used by our universities in our local teacher education programs. So I would just encourage you not to be intimidated by this as administrators or teachers. See this as an opportunity for us to collect data that can be used to improve teaching and learning across the state of Alabama. Thank you.
Alabama Core Teaching Standards were adopted by the State Board of Education in 2020, replacing the Alabama Quality Teaching Standards that were used in Educate Alabama and PEPI. As previously talked about, the Alabama Core Teaching Standards are closely aligned with our teacher observation tool. Let me just give you a few examples. If we look under learning dimension, under the learning dimension number 1, it reads, established and communicates clear expectations about content or activity. If I looked over at our Alabama Core Teaching Standards, it would relate to 3C. This says the educator collaborates with learners and colleagues to develop shared values and expectations for respectful interaction, rigorous academic discussion, individual and group responsibilities for quality work. Let's just give a few more examples. Looking under learning dimension number 2, structures lessons, activities, and or discussions to grow and or deepen learners' thinking and skills. Also, let's look at number 4 too. Adapts instructions and or activities to meet individual learners' needs. If I looked at the Alabama Core Teaching Standards, number 1, under learner development, it reads, the educator understands how learners grow and develop, recognizing the patterns of learning and develop vary individually within and across cognitive, linguistic, social, emotional, and physical areas, and designs and implements developmentally appropriate and challenging learning experiences. Give you another example of the core teaching standards correlation. And 1B, the educator creates developmentally appropriate instruction and takes into account individuals' learners' strengths, interests, and or needs. Let's look again at number 2 in the core, 2A in the core teaching standards. The educator designs, adapts, and delivers instruction to address each student's diverse learning needs and strengths, and creates opportunities for students to demonstrate learning in different ways. Also here you can see how each dimension lines up with the Alabama Core Teaching Standard. This document will be made available for you. If you look closely at the circle, the navy circle, the core teaching standards, on the outskirts of it are the major categories that are in the Alabama Core Teaching Standards. I'll give you just a second to look at those. As you can see, these areas are closely aligned with the teacher observation tool. The teacher observation tool allows us to observe teachers, and the tool allows us to find areas of strength and areas of growth, specifically to certain areas, which helps us align our professional learning and improve teaching and learning for every child, every chance, every day. Rolling this plan out. First of all, our ALSDE staff will be responsible for training all teachers across the state to make sure all administrators are hearing the same message and receiving the same training no matter what part of the state they are located in. Our training of the trainers will consist of 3 days of training. The first day, they will learn about the dynamics of the tool and practice observing the tool and scoring. The second day, we will actually perform observations in elementary, middle, and high schools, and come back and have discussions around these observations. The third day, we will discuss observations, questions, and other linguistics that are concerns that they might have, because they have 2 weeks to practice using this in their own regions. After all of this training, these trainers will be prepared to facilitate 6-hour training sessions for all LEAs in the Regional In-Service Center. We looked at the number of schools per region, and we made room for a principal and one administrator. We understand that some schools have multiple administrators and will need additional training. We will address that in the future, but you do have the option to attend trainings in other areas if that is feasible for you. Well, who will be trained, locations, and the resources that will be available? For example, USA will have 4 days of the same training in September 14th through 17th. Each day, 60 administrators will be trained, 30 per room. 2 ALSDE trainers will be in each room. We want the room size to be under 30 so we can have conversations and really dig in deep to the dimensions and understanding why things are scored the way they are. The information on the screen now just gives your contact information, the dates, and the location per region. All of this information can be found in PowerSchool on August 2nd. Also, an official memo from Dr. Mackey should be going out that day also. If you have questions about specific trainings in your area, please contact your Regional In-Service Center director and they can help you. Some key points to take away today is the observations will be conducted by principals and assistant principals who have been trained to use a teacher observation tool. Each observation will be a minimum of 20 minutes and scored on a 4-point scale. All information will be accessed just like in Educate Alabama through the AIMS portal. If you have any other questions, please contact myself, Dr. Angie Pelton, at the email address below, Dr. Davis, or Angela Martin.
Thank you so much, Angie, for walking us through that. And now we will review the final takeaways about the structure of the tool. Keep in mind there are 5 dimensions: the culture climate, the learning, essentials, agency, and relationship. There are 23 observable teacher actions. And finally, there is a 4-point rating scale: very evident, evident, somewhat evident, and not evident. Thank you for joining us for this webinar series. We hope this overview will be beneficial as you begin to explore and use the teacher observation tool. Thank you for attending.